I came back without warning, expecting the warmth of home, but instead I heard my daughter's scream shattering the silence. The house looked like a war zone. Glass and frames broken, clothes scattered across the floor. My little grandson was gone, and my son-in-law was in Miami, raising glasses of champagne under neon lights. Within an hour of freezing his accounts, he called me 99 times. 99 calls in 60 minutes, each more desperate than the last. Would you have answered? Would you give in to the one who used your grandchild as leverage for money? Or would you stand your ground, even if your heart was breaking? This is the story of how a mother, a retired Navy officer, came home and found herself in a different kind of battlefield, one inside her own family. Stay with me until the end. Leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your voice matters, and together we can bring light into the darkest places. I stepped off the plane at Norfolk International, the early dawn casting a thin gray light across the runway. 30 years in the Navy had carved lines into my face and left scars on my body. But in that moment, I wasn't an officer anymore. I was simply a mother, anxious to hold my daughter Anna and finally cradle my grandson Noah in my arms. My old duffel bag rattled against the tiled floor of baggage claim, and at my wrist, the silver pocket watch that once belonged to my father ticked steadily, reminding me of the promise I had made. No matter where I went, I would always come back home. I climbed into a taxi and cleared my throat. Take me straight to Ocean View Avenue, number 314. My voice cracked as I gave the address, the weight of longing heavy in my chest. The driver nodded, the radio humming low with news about military operations. Words like security and deployment drifting past me like smoke. I had left that world behind just yesterday. Now all I wanted was family, laughter, the cry of a newborn echoing in a warm house. As the cab rolled past the harbor, I stared at the waves catching the pale light, thinking of the nights I had stood on deck, salt air biting at my face, whispering Anna's name. The streets grew narrower as we neared the coast, lined with quiet houses, their windows glowing with early morning lamps. But when we turned onto Ocean View Avenue, my heart clenched. Number 314 was dark, curtains drawn, no sound, no movement, no sign of life. A young couple's home with a newborn inside should have been filled with soft cries, lullabies, maybe even laughter. Instead, silence pressed against the glass like ice. I paid the driver and pulled my bag up the stone steps. The wheels rattled loud in the still air, every sound too sharp, too wrong. I rang the bell. The chime echoed once, twice, then died in emptiness. No answer. I waited, pressed again, knocked harder. Still nothing. My chest tightened. Where was Anna? She'd just given birth. She should have been here, wrapped in blankets, nursing her son. I turned to scan the street, searching for any sign, when Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor, stepped out onto her porch with a watering can. She froze when she saw me. "Margaret, you're back? You don't know?" Her voice shook as if holding back a secret. I rushed across the small lawn, my breath quickening. "Tell me, where is Anna? Is she safe?" Mrs. Thompson set down the can, her hands trembling. "I saw her crying alone for days. And Ethan," she broke off, her eyes wet. "Ethan's been posting pictures. Miami, parties, expensive hotels." My knees went weak, anger and fear rising together. Ethan, the man I had trusted with my daughter, living it up while she was left alone with a newborn? Before I could reply, a sharp crash thundered from inside Anna's house, glass breaking, furniture tumbling, and then the piercing cry of a woman I knew too well. Anna's voice, torn and desperate. My heart stopped. I grabbed the door handle. It wasn't locked. Without another thought, I shoved it open, my bag tumbling to the floor behind me as I stepped into the darkness. My lips trembled as I called her name. Anna! The silence broke again with another crash. I stood in the doorway of the living room, breath caught in my throat, staring at a scene that felt like the battlefield I had just left. Except this one was my home, my family, and the war had only just begun.
The door creaked wider as I stepped inside, and my heart froze at what I saw. The living room, once filled with Anna's laughter and the promise of new life, looked like a battlefield. Chairs overturned, glass scattered across the carpet, photographs torn from their frames. In the center of the chaos, my daughter crouched on the floor, her hair tangled, her eyes hollow and red as if she had not slept for days. She clutched a shattered frame against her chest, rocking back and forth, her voice breaking as she cried out, "He took him! Ethan took Noah!" Each word sliced through me, sharper than any blade I had ever known. I rushed toward her, whispering her name, trying to touch her shoulder. She recoiled as though my hand burned her skin. "Don't touch me," she screamed, throwing the frame against the wall. The glass exploded in 1,000 pieces, and for a moment it felt like I was standing in the middle of a storm I could not control. I wanted to believe she would recognize me, that she would see her mother and feel safe. But in her eyes, I was just another shadow in a nightmare she could not escape. I gathered every ounce of strength and pulled her into my arms. She fought me like a wild animal, clawing at my chest, pounding my shoulders, her voice hoarse with rage. "Let me go! I have to find him! He stole my baby!" Her fists thudded against me, but I refused to release her. "Anna, it's me. I'm here," I pleaded, holding on as if my grip could tether her back to the world. Her body shook so violently that I thought she might break apart in my arms. Her sobs ripped through the air, raw, unrestrained, until at last the fight drained from her, leaving only trembling and shallow breaths. I lowered us both to the floor, still keeping her close. Her tears soaked into my shirt, hot against my skin. I brushed the strands of hair from her face and begged softly, "Tell me what happened." She shook her head again and again, hands tangled in her hair, her nails scraping against her scalp, as if she wanted to rip the pain out by force. My eyes darted around the room, desperate for any sign of Noah. I searched the corners, the hallway, clinging to the smallest hope, but the silence that met me was heavier than steel. Then I heard her whisper, broken and uneven, "He said I can't be a mother. He said I'm crazy." Her voice cracked as she pressed her forehead into her knees. "He took Noah yesterday. He walked out the door and left me here." The words struck me with a force I could hardly bear. Ethan, the man I once welcomed into this family, had reduced my daughter to this, shattered, abandoned, stripped of her child. I closed my eyes for a second, fighting the rage rising inside me, and when I opened them again, I swore I would bring Noah back, no matter what it cost. Anna suddenly tried to stand, lurching toward the door, screaming his name. "Give me back my son," she cried, her voice raw, tearing from her throat like a final act of desperation. I grabbed her before she could reach the handle, pulling her against me as she thrashed. "Please, Anna, stop. You can't go like this. I'll find him, I promise." She struggled, her nails biting into my arms, but I held on. "I can't live without him," she gasped, her body sagging, her strength collapsing at last. She slumped against me, sobbing so hard that every breath seemed to break her all over again. I rocked her slowly, my own tears falling unchecked, whispering over and over, "I'm here. I'm not leaving you." But inside, a different voice raged, cold and merciless. Ethan had crossed a line that could never be undone. He had taken my grandson and shattered my daughter's spirit, and now, whether he knew it or not, he had declared war.
I stumbled through the hallway, my arms wrapped tight around Anna as she clung to me and then pulled away again, trapped between despair and fury. Her cries still echoed in my ears, raw and jagged, as I pushed open the door to the nursery. The sight inside hit me like a bullet. The crib stood empty, its sheets crumpled, and on the floor lay a small blue blanket, the one I had seen in the pictures she sent me from the hospital. I bent down, picked it up, and pressed it to my chest. The faint smell of milk and baby powder still clung to the fabric. My hands trembled, and my heart ached in a way that no battlefield had ever taught me to endure. Anna staggered in behind me, her face pale, her eyes searching every corner as if Noah might crawl back into her arms. She fell against the crib, gripping its wooden rail with white knuckles. "He's gone," she whispered, her voice cracking into a sob. "I woke up, and he was gone." Her knees buckled, and I caught her just before she collapsed onto the floor. I wanted to scream, to tear the walls apart until they gave me back my grandson, but all I could do was hold her. She twisted suddenly, trying to wrench free from my arms. "I have to find him. He's out there. He needs me." Her desperation gave her a strength that nearly overpowered me. I tightened my hold, forcing her back into the chair by the window. "No, Anna, you can't run into the night like this. You'll break." My words came out hoarse, but I would not let her destroy herself in the storm Ethan had left behind. She fought me with trembling hands, scratching at my arms until thin lines of red welled up on my skin. I didn't flinch. I had faced men with rifles and bombs, but nothing compared to the pain of restraining my own child as she drowned in grief. I pulled the curtains closed, shutting out the dawn that was creeping across the street. The room darkened, and for a moment the only sound was Anna's ragged breathing. Her body shook against me, each breath threatening to shatter her all over again. I brushed my hand across her damp hair and whispered, "I'll bring him back. I promise you, I'll bring Noah home." She shook her head, her lips quivering. "He said I'm not fit to be a mother. He said I'm broken." The words tumbled out of her like shards of glass, cutting deep into me. I cupped her face and forced her to look at me. "You are not broken. You are my daughter, and you are stronger than you know." A sudden knock startled me. Mrs. Thompson stood hesitantly at the back door, her eyes wide with worry. I stepped into the kitchen, leaving Anna in the chair. The neighbor's hands shook as she whispered, "I saw him last night, Ethan. He put Noah in the back seat of his car. He carried a bag like he was leaving for good. He didn't look at me, just sped away." My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. He hadn't just taken the child for a walk or a visit, he had taken him away. When I returned to the living room, Anna was on the floor, pounding her fists against the hardwood, her voice hoarse as she screamed Noah's name. Blood trickled from her scraped knuckles, but she didn't stop. I knelt beside her, catching her hands before she hurt herself more. She jerked toward the keys on the table, her eyes wild. "I'll go myself. I'll get him back." I pulled her into my arms once more, tears burning in my own eyes. "No, Anna, you won't. I will. You stay here, you breathe. Let me fight for you now." Her resistance faltered, her body sagging as sobs racked through her. She buried her face against my shoulder and whispered, "Don't let him take my baby away forever." I kissed her hair, my tears mingling with hers. "He won't," I swore. My voice cracked, but my resolve was steel. As I held her trembling body in the quiet wreckage of that house, I knew this was no longer just about a missing child. Ethan had declared war on the wrong woman. I did not wait for calm. I lifted Anna from the floor, felt the tremor in her bones, and led her to the kitchen. Mrs. Thompson hovered near the back door, voice thin with worry. "Call a cab," I said. "Make it fast." Anna swayed like a reed.
I wrapped Noah's blue blanket over her shoulders and held it closed as if thread could keep her from breaking. The car arrived with a soft chirp. The driver saw her eyes and asked nothing. We slid into the back seat. The blanket pooled like a small ocean between us, and I kept my arm around her as if that alone could anchor her to the earth. The ride to the hospital was a tunnel. Anna pressed her forehead to the window and breathed his name into the glass, syllables fogging and fading, as if the air itself could not hold them. I counted our breaths the way I once counted heartbeats before a breach. The radio muttered weather and construction. A morning host laughed, and Anna flinched like the sound had sharp edges. "Stop the car," she burst out. "I have to find him." I pulled her close, repeated her name until the panic broke like a wave. The red emergency sign lifted ahead, washed her face in its warning light, and for a moment I felt my teeth ache. At intake, they asked for names and dates and numbers, the dry language that never fits a breaking heart. I gave everything and signed wherever they pointed. Anna stared at the floor as if tile might answer. A nurse with soft eyes touched my elbow. "We will take her for evaluation. You can watch from the corridor window." I kissed my daughter's temple. "I am right here," I said. Her breath shook. Then the doors folded her away, and the latch clicked like a small verdict. Behind the glass, the room hummed. Anna sat on the edge of a narrow bed, hands knotted in the blanket, rocking a few inches forward and back. A physician with tired, kind eyes crouched to meet her gaze. He did not rush. He spoke in a low, steady tone and let silence do part of the work. I could not hear their words, but I saw them land. When he asked about sleep, she flinched. When he asked about fear, shame crossed her face like a cloud. I pressed my palm to the window and tried to send steadiness through the glass, the way heat moves from a stove into cold metal. Minutes stretched thin. A nurse slid a cuff around her arm, noted numbers, placed a small cup in her hand. Anna hesitated, then swallowed. Her shoulders dropped a fraction, like a rope finally given slack. My reflection stared back at me from the glass, a woman who had commanded rooms with radios and maps, and now could only stand in wait while her own child learned to breathe again. The doctor joined me in the corridor that smelled of disinfectant and coffee. "Postpartum depression," he said, the phrase landing like a verdict I already knew. "Severe. We will admit her for a few days, maybe longer. A mild sedative now, then a plan." He studied my face the way sailors study weather. "She needs safety, structure, and someone she trusts. Can you be that person?" I signed another form before he finished. My name on paper felt like a pledge paid in blood. They wheeled her past on a gurney, lashes still wet, fingers pinched around the blanket. I walked beside her until a nurse lifted a gentle hand. "This is as far as you go." I leaned close. "Hear me, Anna. I will bring Noah back. Sleep if you can. Breathe. Let me carry the rest." Her lips moved like she wanted to answer, but the medicine had already softened the edges of pain. The doors closed again, quiet as a held breath, and I was left with the tick of a clock and the ache of promises that must be kept. I sat on a plastic chair and opened my father's old pocket watch. The steady tick steadied me. I thought of Ethan saying broken, as if that word could excuse what he had done, as if he could paste it onto my daughter and walk away lighter. Rage rose and cooled into something harder. I scrolled to a number I had not used in years. Jack Monroe answered on the second ring. I gave him the shape of it in the fewest words. "My daughter, the baby, the spending, the threats. Bring me her power of attorney and any evidence you have," he said. "Come now." I looked at the fresh ink on the forms in my lap. I will be there within the hour." Before I left, I pressed my hand to the glass one last time. Anna lay on her side, breathing slow, the blanket tucked beneath her chin like a tide, at last turning. I whispered the promise again, not for her, but for the part of me that could not fail. "I will bring him home, and I will bring you back to yourself." Then I stood, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the sunlight, ready to make the first call in a new kind of war.
The house was silent when I returned from the hospital, but it was not the kind of silence that soothes. It was the silence of broken glass still scattered across the floor, of walls that had listened to too much crying. I pushed the door open and stepped inside, my boots crunching against shards that glittered faintly in the weak morning light. I had promised Anna I would find Noah, and promises are heavier than stone when spoken to your child. I set my bag down and began searching. On the desk in the corner, beneath a heap of envelopes and a cold mug of coffee, I found the first sign. A thick folder of receipts, corners bent, ink smeared but still legible. My hands shook as I flipped through them. A 5-star hotel in Miami, rooms larger than my daughter's entire house, plane tickets in business class, his name written bold across them, and then one that made my throat tighten, a Rolex watch worth more than I had earned in months of deployment, purchased 3 days before Anna had broken down, paid for on her card. I pressed the paper flat against the desk, my nails digging into the wood. I photographed everything, each receipt captured in sharp focus, as if evidence could anchor me against the storm inside. My phone buzzed with another message from Ethan, but I ignored it. I wasn't ready to hear his voice. I wasn't ready to hear him pretend. Instead, I opened her laptop. The screen lit up to reveal bank statements, each line a cut across her life. Withdrawals at night, transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, meals at restaurants where the wine cost more than Anna's entire grocery budget. He had bled her dry, penny by penny, smile by smile. My chest burned. I reached for my father's pocket watch, pressed it hard against my palm. I had fought men who trafficked weapons and drugs, men who lied through their teeth as villages burned. Yet this betrayal, from the man I had once trusted to protect my daughter, felt sharper than all of it. The phone buzzed again, but this time I answered. His face filled the screen, the camera angled to show off the balcony of his hotel. Behind him, palm trees swayed in the Florida heat, and music throbbed from speakers I couldn't see. He grinned like this was casual, like I had interrupted his fun. "What now?" he said, glancing over his shoulder at the laughter of his friends. I kept my voice steady. "Anna is in the hospital. She has postpartum depression. She needed you, and you left her." For a second, his smile faltered, and he shrugged. "I know, so what?" Those 2 words turned my stomach to ice. I lifted the receipts toward the screen. "I know about the hotels, the flights, the Rolex, every dime you stole. It's over." His grin returned, colder now. "In marriage, what's hers is mine." The word family stung like poison. He had abandoned my daughter, taken her child, and still dared to claim blood as shield. My voice dropped. "This is the last time you will ever touch her money." He leaned closer, eyes narrowing. "You think you can stop me?" I ended the call without another word. My hand trembled, but not from fear, from rage so sharp it steadied me. I placed the receipts in a neat stack, slid them into an envelope, and sealed it tight. Then I opened the drawer beside the desk and pulled out the document Anna had signed before I left for deployment, her financial power of attorney. I ran my finger across her signature, fragile but strong, and tucked it into my bag. The air in the house felt heavier than before, but also clearer, like the first breath after smoke. Ethan thought he could live off her silence, thought I would stay away. He had no idea who he was dealing with. I gathered the papers, grabbed the phone, and whispered into the empty room,
"You've declared war on the wrong woman." Then I turned off the light, locked the door behind me, and walked back into the day, ready to strike.
Jack Monroe's office was lit by the glow of multiple monitors, the kind of light that carved hard edges into a man's face. He didn't waste words when I placed the folder on his desk. The power of attorney, signed by Anna months before, slid across the polished wood like a loaded weapon. Jack scanned it, his eyes narrowing, then gave a sharp nod. "We'll lock him out." The room shifted into motion. His team of specialists moved like a strike unit, fingers hammering keys, screens flashing with account numbers, balances, transactions frozen midstream. One by one, Ethan's lifelines collapsed. Credit cards disabled, transfers blocked, accounts sealed. A message blinked across the monitor. Access denied. My chest rose with something close to relief, but it was thin, fleeting. Because at that very moment, my phone vibrated on the desk. Ethan's name glared back at me. One call, then another, each buzz more insistent. I let it ring until it silenced itself, only to scream back alive seconds later. 10 calls, 20. By 30, my hands were shaking with the sheer persistence of it. By the time it reached 99, the screen looked like a warning beacon. My stomach churned, but I didn't pick up. Not yet. Then the messages came. The first was venom. "Who do you think you are, touching my money? You'll regret this." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then another message arrived. "Margaret, let's talk. We can work this out." And then a voice note, his voice stripped of charm. "Open the account, I'll give you Noah back. Just open the account." The office went still, Jack's gaze locked on mine. He didn't say a word, but the fury in his eyes told me he had heard every syllable. I pressed save, the sound of Ethan's desperation now mine to keep. He had turned my grandson into currency, reduced him to leverage, and in doing so, he had revealed exactly what he was. The phone rang again, and this time I answered. His voice was frantic, sweat-soaked even through the line. "Margaret, listen, you're making a mistake. Noah's fine. You want to see him again, you stop this, unlock the money." I gripped the edge of the desk, nails biting into wood. "Where is he?" I demanded. "Safe," Ethan said. "As safe as your daughter if you play along." My blood turned cold. I spoke low, steady. "You will never touch another dollar of my daughter's money again, and you will never use my grandson's name in your mouth as a bargaining chip." He erupted, shouting curses, but I ended the call before the poison could seep further. The line went dead. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion I had known in combat. Jack slid a printout toward me. "Every attempt he makes now triggers an alert. He won't buy a cup of coffee without us knowing." I stared at the page, each failed attempt already recorded. Ethan was scrambling, clawing, panicked. The walls were closing in on him, and I could almost hear the echo of it across the miles. I stepped out into the evening air, the sky split with the last orange of a fading sun. My phone buzzed again, softer this time, a stream of texts. "Please, I didn't mean for it to get this far. Just one chance." Then another. "Do this and I'll bring Noah home tonight." I read them all, then slid the phone back into my coat. My boots struck the pavement, each step measured, heavy, final. He believed I would bend. He believed fear would buy my silence. But peace bought with fear is no peace at all. Somewhere out there, my grandson was waiting. Ethan thought money was his shield. He had no idea his shield was already full of cracks. That night, I could not shake the feeling that eyes were on me. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet, and when I stepped onto the porch, I saw it. A black SUV idling across the street, its headlights dimmed, but its engine running. My hand went instinctively to the pocket of my coat, where the weight of my old service pistol rested, a relic I had sworn not to need again. The phone buzzed in my hand before I could turn away. A message from an unknown number lit the screen. "Stop now, or Noah disappears for good." My grip tightened until the glass creaked. I drew the curtains, moving silently through the rooms as if the house itself were hostile ground. Broken glass still crunched under my boots. reminders of the chaos Anna had left behind. I replaced the locks with new steel ones, each turn of the screwdriver echoing like the ratchet of a rifle. When I was done, I sealed the doors with strips of military tape, coated the seams as if this were a forward operating post. No one would enter without me knowing. At the desk, I pulled the receipts and bank statements from my bag, laying them out like a map of betrayal. Hotel suites in Miami, champagne bottles, a Rolex that gleamed in the photos Ethan had posted online. And then, buried beneath the stack, I found Anna's leather notebook. Pages filled with her handwriting, dated lines that told the story in ink, long before I had seen it in numbers. $10,000 handed to Ethan for house bills, $20,000 withdrawn for his supposed business. The amounts matched the bank statements, but here in her shaky script, it was more than numbers. It was trust, given and stolen. My throat burned as I traced her words with my finger. I scanned each page into my laptop, saved the files to 3 different drives, one hidden in the floorboards, one in a safe at Jack's office, one encrypted online. I had learned long ago that proof must survive, even when you do not. My phone lit again. This time, it was not threats. Ethan's voice crackled through another recording. "I can fix this, Margaret. Just unlock the account. You'll see Noah again. We'll be a family." His tone almost soft, almost believable, but I knew the shape of lies too well. I saved the recording, my face hard as stone. Past midnight, I called another old friend, a man who once tracked contraband shipments across the Atlantic. He answered with the same gravel in his voice I remembered. "Trace this number," I told him, giving Ethan's contact. 10 minutes later, he called back. "Signal pings near downtown Miami. He hasn't left his hotel." I thanked him, slid the phone shut, and stared into the dark. So that was where Noah was, trapped somewhere behind polished glass and palm trees, while his father burned through money that was not his. The SUV outside finally pulled away, its tail lights disappearing into the night. But I knew it would be back, or another one like it. Ethan was cornered now, and cornered men are dangerous. I sat at the desk, watch ticking steadily beside me, and began to write down the chain of evidence as cleanly as a mission log. Every receipt, every text, every call, every line of Anna's notebook. Each piece was a bullet, and each bullet aimed not at flesh, but at the armor Ethan thought money would provide. When dawn broke, light crept across the taped seams of the door, glinting off the glass shards still on the floor. I gathered the papers into a box and closed it with firm hands. In war, clarity comes when the enemy shows his hand. Ethan had shown his. Greed, cowardice, and now fear. I whispered into the empty house, "You thought you could break her. You thought you could break us. But now it's my turn."
The courthouse in downtown Norfolk loomed like a fortress, its stone pillars catching the pale morning light. I walked up the steps with the box of evidence in my arms, each page inside heavier than iron. My uniform was gone, but my posture carried the same weight as when I led men into combat. Today I carried not a rifle, but the truth, and truth can cut deeper than steel. Inside, the courtroom was cold, lined with wooden benches polished smooth by years of grief and anger. Ethan sat at the opposite table in a dark tailored suit, a smirk tugging at his lips as if this were another game to win. His lawyer leaned close, whispering, trying to paint him as the victim before the fight had even begun. I forced myself not to look at him, not to let rage control me. Instead, I placed the box on my attorney's desk, and when he opened it, the quiet shuffle of paper felt like the loading of weapons. The judge entered, robes flowing, eyes sharp behind his glasses. "We will hear the matter of Collins versus Miller," he announced, voice steady. My attorney, Mr. Anderson, rose first. He laid out the receipts, the bank statements, the photographs of Ethan smiling with his Rolex while Anna was left in despair. "Your Honor, this is not just financial abuse. This is abandonment at the most fragile moment of a mother's life." He spoke with precision, every word measured, every point landing like a strike.
The defense countered, slick and rehearsed. These are normal expenditures within a marriage. The depression Mrs. Collins suffers is unfortunate, but not caused by my client. He gestured to Ethan, who lowered his eyes and clasped his hands like a penitent child. For a moment the room was still, as if he might succeed in wrapping his crimes in charm. Then Anderson called the psychologist who had treated Anna at the hospital. She stepped forward, gray hair pulled back in a bun, her voice calm but unwavering. Postpartum depression is real, and it is dangerous. With support, Anna could have recovered at home. Instead, she was abandoned, undermined, and called unfit by the very man who should have been her anchor. This was neglect. This was cruelty. Her words cracked the silence, and even the court reporter paused for a breath. Ethan shifted in his seat, jaw tight, eyes darting toward me. I stood when the judge asked for my testimony. My throat burned, but my voice came steady. I served this country for 3 decades. I trusted Ethan to guard what I could not. Instead, he stripped my daughter of her dignity, took her child, and spent her savings as if her pain did not matter. No absence of mine gives him the right to destroy her. He left her to drown, and he took my grandson with him. The judge studied me, then turned back to the defense. They tried to speak again, but their arguments fell thin, brittle against the mountain of evidence. The judge lifted his gavel. Pending further proceedings, all assets are frozen. Custodial access is suspended. Mr. Miller is prohibited from contacting Mrs. Collins or her child until this court decides otherwise. The gavel struck once, the sound cracking through the chamber like thunder. Ethan shot to his feet, face twisted. "You'll regret this," he spat, but 2 bailiffs were already at his side, steering him out as his threats echoed uselessly behind him. I sat down slowly, my hands trembling only after it was done. For the first time since I had stepped off the plane, I felt the faintest shift of weight leaving my shoulders. Justice had not yet been fully won, but the ground beneath my daughter was no longer crumbling. And as I walked out into the noonday sun, I knew Ethan's empire of deceit was finally beginning to collapse.
Weeks later, the divorce hearing was set, and I walked beside Anna through the courthouse doors. She was pale but steadier now, her steps measured, her chin lifted just enough to show the fight had returned to her eyes. I gripped her hand, as if strength could flow between us, and together we entered the chamber where fate would finally be decided. Ethan was already seated, his suit crisp, his expression carefully painted into false sorrow. He barely looked at Anna, as if she were nothing but an obstacle between him and the life he thought he deserved. His lawyer shuffled papers, whispering strategy, but the air around them smelled of defeat. I kept my gaze fixed forward, refusing to give him the satisfaction of my fury. The judge began, his tone clipped, moving through the motions with the patience of a man who had heard every excuse before. Anderson, our attorney, rose again. He presented the timeline, the receipts, the voice recordings where Ethan used Noah's name like currency. Each piece landed with the weight of a hammer. Anna's notebook was entered into evidence, her careful handwriting describing every dollar given to Ethan and every promise broken. I saw her watching the pages, her lips trembling, but she did not look away. Then she was called to the stand. My daughter stood, shoulders squared though her knees wavered, and swore her oath with a voice almost too quiet to hear. She spoke of sleepless nights, of Ethan calling her unfit, of waking to an empty crib and silence where her baby's cry should have been. Her voice cracked, but she never stopped. He told me I wasn't a mother. He took my son to prove it. The room was still, the weight of her words pressing down on every corner of that court. The defense tried to counter, spinning stories of joint accounts and marital rights, but the judge had already seen the truth. His gavel fell like thunder. The marriage dissolved. Custody awarded to Anna. Ethan stripped of access to both child and money. The doors at the back opened then, and a social worker stepped inside, carrying Noah. My grandson's small face peeked from the blanket, his eyes wide and searching. Anna gasped, her body jolting forward before she even realized she had moved. She ran across the room, arms outstretched, tears falling freely as she clutched him to her chest. Noah whimpered, then nestled into her, as if the weeks apart dissolved in a single heartbeat. I stood frozen, my own tears burning as I watched them. When Anna turned towards me, her arms still cradling her son, she whispered, "Mom, he's home." I stepped forward, my hands trembling as she placed Noah into my arms. The weight of him, warm and real, pressed against my chest, and for the first time in months, I felt the ache inside me begin to mend. Ethan was led out in silence, his eyes darting, his mouth twisted, but his power was gone. The sound of Anna's soft sobs and Noah's tiny breaths drowned out whatever curse he tried to throw behind him. I kissed the boy's forehead, and with him in my arms, I knew the war had taken so much, but it had not taken us. We had survived, and we had won.
Months passed, and the rhythm of our lives began to change. The mornings no longer carried the sting of silence, but the soft hum of Noah's laughter spilling through Anna's small house. I would watch her cradle him in the rocking chair, sunlight streaming across her face, no longer hollowed by despair, but touched with something new, fragile yet steady. One evening, she turned to me and said, "Mom, I want to help women who went through what I did." Her voice trembled, but there was light in it. That night, we drew up the first outlines of what would become the New Dawn Foundation. We started small, just a few meetings in the basement of the community center. Folding chairs lined the walls, the scent of coffee drifting through the air. Women came hesitantly at first, clutching their coats, eyes downcast. Then they listened to Anna speak, and the room shifted. She stood before them, Noah in her arms, and said, "I thought I had lost everything. I believed I was broken, but I wasn't, and neither are you." The silence that followed was heavy, not empty, but full of women recognizing themselves in her words. Then came the applause, soft at first, then swelling, a sound of courage breaking through. Reporters began to call, local papers ran our story, then regional stations picked it up. Donations trickled in, then poured. I spent long nights sorting through paperwork, meeting volunteers, watching my daughter transform from someone who had once collapsed on a nursery floor into a woman lifting others back to their feet. Each time I saw her stand before a room, telling her story without shame, I felt the weight of the past ease, piece by piece. One afternoon, after a small gathering, a young woman approached Anna, tears streaking her cheeks. "I thought I was alone," she whispered, "but hearing you, I believe I can try again." Anna held her hand, her voice firm. "You're not alone. None of us are." Watching them, I understood the true power of survival. It was not only reclaiming your own life, but offering light to someone still lost in the dark. At home that evening, Noah toddled across the living room, his laughter filling the walls that once knew only grief. Anna watched him, her smile steady, then turned to me. "We came back from the edge, Mom. We made it." I gathered them both into my arms, my eyes burning, and whispered, "Yes, we did, and we'll keep making it, one day at a time." As the sun set over the Norfolk shoreline, I stood on the porch, the air salty and sharp, and thought of everything we had endured: betrayal, fear, silence, and nights that seemed endless. Yet here we were, together, stronger than before. I turned to the camera inside my mind, speaking to whoever might be listening.
If you are standing in the dark, thinking no one will hear you, speak anyway. Find the hand that reaches back. And if this story has touched you, share it so another person might see they are not alone. Because sometimes survival is not just for ourselves, but for the countless others who need to know the light is still there.